Today was another exhausting day of chasing life, but instead of staying trapped inside the city, I decided to spend the day beside the river again. Fishing has slowly become more than just a hobby for me. It's one of the few things that truly clears my mind. Whenever I sit beside the water with a fishing rod in my hands, all the stress, noise, and pressure of everyday life seem to fade away for a while. Early in the morning, I loaded all my gear into the back of my BMW, rods, bait, tackle boxes, umbrella, bucket, folding chair, and extra supplies. The best thing about today's fishing location was how convenient it was. I could park the car almost directly beside the water without walking long distances through muddy paths, carrying heavy equipment. Anyone who fishes regularly understands how important that is. Sometimes the most tiring part of fishing isn't catching fish at all, it's carrying everything to the spot before you even begin. As soon as I stepped out of the car, I noticed the weather immediately. A light rain had just passed through minutes earlier. The ground was still wet, and the air smelled strongly of fresh rain mixed with river mud and grass. Thick gray clouds completely covered the sky, making everything look darker than usual. Looking up, I could already tell there was a high chance another storm would arrive later. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. The weather lately has been terrible almost every single day. There hasn't been a proper sunny day in a long time. If I kept waiting for perfect weather before going fishing, I would probably never fish at all. Real anglers understand this feeling perfectly. Rain or shine, hot or cold, the love for fishing never changes. So without wasting time, I started preparing my setup. The water at this spot wasn't very deep, probably around 80 to 90 centimeters, shallow enough for active feeding fish, but still deep enough to hold decent schools underneath. Before even touching my fishing rod, I began mixing bait carefully. Today's setup was my favorite three-piece combo: Gangdon No to pellets, 7-link formula, and extra insect essence. Because fish usually become more aggressive toward natural scents during rainy weather, I intentionally added more insect flavor than normal. Once everything was mixed together, the smell became incredibly strong. Honestly, even I thought the bait smelled powerful enough to wake fish up from the bottom of the river. After preparing the bait, I finally pulled out today's main weapon, my 2.7 meter 8, 5H heavy power rod. This rod is an absolute beast. It's extremely stiff, strong, and designed for powerful hook sets. Some people think using a rod like this for medium-sized river fish is unnecessary, but personally, I love the feeling. The moment a strong fish strikes and bends a heavy rod deeply, the adrenaline rush feels completely different. I barely finished my first cast before the float suddenly twitched. Then it sank underwater completely. Fish on. The first catch of the day was a beautiful mud carp. Not massive, but definitely a strong start. The fish fought surprisingly hard in the shallow water, flashing greenish scales beneath the dark cloudy sky. Fish like this are perfect for cooking, fried crispy or steamed with fermented black beans. They taste incredible. Fresh river fish always carries a flavor that market fish simply cannot match. While I was removing the hook, tiny raindrops began falling again. The rain returned quietly, tapping softly against my umbrella while cold wind moved across the riverbank. Honestly, the weather these days has been frustrating. The ground barely dries before another rain shower arrives. But strangely, fishing during rainy weather creates a peaceful atmosphere that's difficult to describe. The sound of rain touching the river's surface, the smell of wet earth and grass, the silence broken only by splashes and moving water. It makes the entire world feel slower for a while. Then suddenly, the fish became completely crazy. The school beneath me started feeding aggressively. Sometimes the float didn't even have enough time to stand upright before being dragged violently. Underwater again. Cast after cast, bite after bite, fish after fish. The action became non-stop. It honestly felt like the entire riverbed was packed with hungry fish, waiting for bait to fall into the water. Most of today's catches were mud carp with beautiful green scales reflecting beneath the cloudy sky. Surprisingly, I barely caught any tilapia at all, compared to the fish I used to catch at my old favorite fishing location. These ones were slightly smaller, but the incredible number of bites made today unforgettable. I still miss my old fishing spot sometimes. Years ago, that place was one of the best locations I had ever discovered. Giant fish lived there, and every trip felt exciting, because you never knew what monster might strike your bait next. But after several major floods passed through the river system, everything changed. strong currents destroyed underwater structures and scattered the fish population everywhere. Then more and more anglers discovered the location. After that came the net fishermen. Little by little, the magic disappeared. That's why I eventually stopped going there. These days, finding a truly productive fishing spot feels harder than ever. But today's river definitely surprised me. At one point, the fish became so aggressive that I had to pull out my old fish unhooking tool from storage. It had been sitting unused for such a long time that the metal screw had already started rusting. Normally, I remove hooks by hand without problems, but today the fish were biting too quickly. Efficiency mattered. Then came the true crazy catching mode. Every cast brought another fish. Some strikes were so aggressive that the float danced wildly across the surface, before disappearing instantly. A few larger fish bent my heavy rod deeply enough to make my heart race for a moment. Even with such a stiff setup, I could still feel every powerful vibration traveling through the rod into my hands. That feeling never becomes boring. Fishing creates a kind of excitement that only real anglers truly understand. Watching the float carefully, waiting patiently, reacting instantly when the float disappears, feeling the fish pulling hard beneath the water, it becomes addictive. Hours passed so quickly that I completely lost track of time. Eventually, I checked my phone and realized I needed to leave because today was also my niece's birthday. Honestly, part of me wanted to stay until sunset because the fishing was only getting better and better. But no matter how exciting the fish are biting, family always comes first. So finally, I decided to stop. Before packing up my gear, I looked down into the bucket and smiled. Even though it was only a small bucket, it had become surprisingly heavy. Nearly every fish inside was a healthy mud carp with beautiful color and solid size. Normally, fish like these would become dinner, but today there simply wasn't enough time to clean and prepare them properly. So instead, I decided to release every fish back into the river. One by one, the fish splashed into the dark water and disappeared into the current below. Watching fish swim away after a successful day always gives me a strange feeling of peace. A few of them floated awkwardly for several seconds, almost like they were dizzy from staying inside the bucket too long. But eventually they regained strength and disappeared into deeper water. By the time I arrived home, the atmosphere had completely changed. The quiet riverside silence was replaced with warmth, light, delicious food, and laughter. Since it was my niece's birthday, the whole family had prepared a large dinner filled with her favorite dishes. The dining table was covered with chicken feet, white-boiled chicken noodles, vegetables, snacks, and several homemade family meals. In the kitchen, a large white eel simmered slowly inside a pot. We bought it from the market earlier for 35 yuan per jin. Honestly, I still don't know whether that price was cheap or expensive, but the eel definitely looked impressive, enough to become the centerpiece of the meal. Outside, rain continued falling softly against the windows while inside, everyone sat together talking, eating, and laughing happily. Moments like these remind me that happiness is often much simpler than people think. Sometimes, happiness isn't luxury cars. Sometimes it isn't fame, money, or expensive things. Sometimes happiness is simply spending the day beside a peaceful river, feeling the excitement of a fish striking your bait, sharing food with family, and hearing laughter fill the house while rain falls outside. Then finally, the birthday cake arrived. The lights dimmed while everyone sang together. My niece stood quietly in front of the candles with a shy smile on her face. After the song ended, she closed her eyes tightly and made a wish. A few seconds later, she opened her eyes, looked directly at me, and said softly, "I hope my uncle can reach 1 million followers someday." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. After standing beside muddy water all day in the rain, after carrying heavy fishing gear, and feeling exhausted from hours outdoors, hearing those simple words suddenly made every bit of tiredness disappear completely. Sometimes motivation doesn't come from money. Sometimes it doesn't come from views or fame either. Sometimes motivation comes from family, from the people who quietly believe in you before the rest of the world even notices your existence. And honestly, hearing her say that made me want to work even harder than before. Maybe one day, her wish will truly come true, and when that day finally arrives, I'll probably remember this rainy fishing trip forever.